Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our very special second Warped Wednesday. Here we have Wallace O'Donnell and Mike Pestilence bringing you updates live from the Immaterium. Wallace, my friend, how are you doing today?
Oh, I have never been better. I
Never
woke
better.
and I felt as slothed as can be. I've been sneezing all day, and I got something to say. You know what I got to say, Mr. Mike?
Wallace, my friend, what do you have to say?
I'm gonna say it's our first Nurgle episode.
Our very first Nurgle episode. Bless the Plague Father, for we are having a very special episode today.
Yeah, for all my stinky fans out there, all my stinky boys and stinky girls that are in the chats and watching today's video. Yeah, this is for you. This is your day.
Yeah, it was actually perfect. I saw in our in the Discord today in the general channel, there was some talk about some Nurgle lore, some really cool quotes from Plague War actually, and Lord of Silence got brought up, which again, I'm always happy to see people in Discord mention Lords of Silence because that is one of my favorite 40K books.
Yeah. What was the quote, Mike? Give me the quote. Quote me the quote. It was very.
Let's see. From Delirious. So shout out to Delirious. It was basically the scene. It's the Plague Marines are kind of losing their connection to the warp, and they're basically getting the full effect of what's happening to them. They're realizing it for the first time. Steeped in the power of their diabolical god, the effect of the Plague Marines was far greater. They moaned and fell down, some stone dead. Others shrieked as if the horror of their condition had suddenly become plain to them. Time seemed out of joint. There was nothing but shouting all around him. It's not fun being a Plague Marine outside of the warp.
Yeah, it cuts off the warp, so all those guys that are like got their guts hanging out, bro, you got your guts hanging out, you're gonna die. They all went, ah!
Yeah.
So
what's interesting is I've heard Nurgle is almost in a sense kind of a not like a satire or more like a reflection of like addiction in a lot of ways and working in addiction recovery. I can definitely see like a lot of the similarities they're talking about. But man, that is just Nurgle, you definitely want to be on the good side of Nurgle, because if you're on the bad side of Nurgle, things get disgusting very quickly. Well subject, go ahead.
Well, Nurgle's all about the cycles. It's the growth, and the decay. It's the building of what is on top of what is until it becomes this big mass, and then it rots over from within. That's his whole thing. That's gross decay.
Absolutely. More
so
like go ahead.
Well, I mean, since we're on the topic, since we're talking about it, since that's what's being discussed, why don't you tell me about something that is on your mind from the hobby side of things?
Yeah.
How is it going? What have you been working on?
Yeah.
Your thing stacked on top of another thing until you have a feculent mass of incomplete things.
All right, here's my Gnarl of updates. So the Decimators I brought to Seattle a couple weeks ago. I'll be honest, they had like 5 or 6 colors plus solid base, and like they weren't like, it wasn't shameful or anything, but they definitely weren't like amazingly painted or anything. So I'm using the fact I don't have any tournaments coming up for a hot minute to actually go back and touch up some of my Chaos Space Marine models, especially with some leaks. And Codex is coming around the corner. Spoiler alert for later in the episode. So I'm kind of just touching up my Decimator. Let's see if I can get it going up. I didn't realize this before I got the models, but they have this really cool, one of their knee pads on each model is actually like skin stretched out instead of the traditional metal. So I'll do something really fun, get like some blood effects or like some pus and ooze coming out of that. And they really touch up a lot more like the metal details on top. Because Decimators, like, they were one of those models when I first saw it, a bit like a Lord of Skulls. I was a little skeptical. When you see it in person, it actually looks a lot cooler. So yeah, I'm really enjoying hobbying on these. Wallace, what are you hobbying on in the past week, my friend?
Well, I mean, I still have this pile of goats I've been working through.
It's a lot of goats.
It's a lot of goats, but it's Nurgle's week. And I don't really want to get Zanich all mixed up in his garden.
No, that's how you get a great war going between the gods. You don't want that.
Yeah, and that doesn't need to be taken over my hobby. Honestly, my hobby table does look like that is what's happening because I took a break to do this week a couple of Death Guard units. I was pretty excited about some ideas that I hope we'll get into today. And I busted out some old Death Guard stuff. I was painting some flesh mowers.
Okay.
I was painting some plague marines. There's no point in me doing these things. I just wanted to do these things because it's Nurgle week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Were there any Nurgle demons you painted? Seen that Nurgle in front of you?
So I've been working on one of them. I don't know. I guess I'll show you guys now. I found him abandoned in a box. He has no base. He was horribly painted. He's now still horribly painted, but I've been hard at work. I've got
Horticulus Slimix. There we go.
Yeah.
The myth, the legend.
Yeah, it's one of my most beloved models. I love snails. Yeah. And he's a big demon snail. Like, what can you ask for?
Yeah.
So on that note, let's talk a little bit about Death Guard, Mike.
Okay. So Wallace and I have come up with a theory that, and I say this with no offense to anyone, I know there's a lot of passionate Death Guard players out there. I know there's a lot of very good Death Guard players out there. A lot of people try to make the faction work in a very hostile manner. But Wallace, I'm going to be entirely honest, and I mean everyone listening, your Death Guard list sucks. But it's not too late to fix that. Wallace, we've been looking over Death Guard lists that we've seen pop up in BCP or people bringing over the last few weeks, and we have not been very impressed.
No, sir. I would rather say I've been quite disappointed. I think there's a few common denominators that immediately pop out to me personally as things that I would shy away from. There's some shiny toys Death Guard have that are, as you get closer, you realize just how rancid those toys are, and not in the good Nurgle way.
Not a fun, bubbly rancid, like just a disgusting, boring rancid.
And Death Guard are not putting up the numbers to disagree with me right now. They just aren't. We're sitting at like a 30% win rate? Something like that?
We're like the Imperial Guard of Chaos. No offense, Guard players. I know you're still battling some major respect.
Right. And normally I write off a good portion of win rates as like player skill gap. But when I looked into it further, the people that are like dedicated Death Guard players aren't putting up wins. So, or they're just straight up abandoning the faction. So something's wrong here. Something's rotten.
You hate to see. Rotten. I love that. But you hate to see a faction, when this has happened to Chaos factions before, you hate to see it when like even longtime fans are getting discouraged or not really enjoying playing the faction. Because at the end it's a game. You want people to enjoy the faction they're playing. But I think Death Guard players, so here's kind of expand what you're saying. Here's our main issue. People say Death Guard are really slow. People say Death Guard are very vulnerable to mortal wounds. And that's like partially true, but also they keep bringing the slowest and most vulnerable to mortal wound units and then saying that's just a big weakness of the faction. And I'm not entirely convinced. I think there's a lot of unexplored or underexplored units in the Death Guard roster that you and I are really excited about.
So I'm going to be upfront about this. I think Death Guard Terminators are bad. Garbage. I don't think they're very good. I think they're bad in the current meta. And I think because of the way that they were pointed, and keep in mind they went up during the last Munitatorium field guide, everything else is just more efficient now. Like I compare a Death Guard Terminator, a single like Death Shroud even, which people say are great. And I compare that to like a Scarab Occult, which like granted, you're comparing across codexes, so you're not taking everything into account. Well, I'm saying take into account. Just nowhere near on the same playing field. Yeah. And you're paying a freaking, like you're paying an arm and a leg for these guys. They're so expensive, Mike.
Yeah. Like, I was genuinely shocked. I popped in like latest points updates, was messing around some Death Guard lists. People are unironically taking Death Shroud to 55 points.
Holy mackerel, man.
Like, I think honestly, like this will be a bit of a hot take, but again, you know what? I like my hot takes, Wallace. And hopefully people like listening to them. I think Death Shroud are honestly one of the worst units in the entire codex.
they're not
like easily a bottom 5 unit in the Death Guard Codex. Like they're an active handicap at this point in this meta at this point cost.
I actually think I mean, here's the thing. I actually think Blight Lords may be worse. I don't like it when my army is expensive and loses to a tape measure. Like it's not, you're not giving yourself angles of play. You're not giving yourself the ability to play the objective. You're just hoping you can push your slow guys into the middle of the table and somehow grind it out against some of the best factions in the game. And here's the thing, even if you get your guys to where they need to go, you aren't winning those trades point for point. And I get the hopelessness there, because what the heck do you do if you don't have Terminators? It seems like that's the thing that your codex has that's good. Yeah. I mean, the data sheets or the data slates, the balance update, it even looks like that's what it's trying to push you to do. Oh, play Terminators. They're OBSEC now. But they just can't compete point for point with a lot of the better factions. And
part of it, Wallace, I think why you've been so successful with the Disciples is remembering that ultimately it is a movement-based game. Like you win games by getting to places, but also, you know, movement also helps you like hit first, like hit things that you want to hit instead of what they want you to hit. Death Shroud unit moving 5 inches is never going to hit something. They're never going to be like, wow, like this Death Shroud like got some certain way. I think part of it too is that Terminators pay for points of deep striking, which you should never really ever deep strike your Terminators. This is something a lot of people miss when they first get into kind of competitive play. Like Terminators, just across every single army that uses them, like always start them on the board. So like I see people doing stuff like talk about like, oh, I brought my Death Shroud and I deep struck them. I failed all my 9-inch charges, and I'm like a little confused, because you just should never, like, you always assume you're going to fail any charge unless you have like a massive charge bonus out of deep strike. Like melee units should not be coming out of deep strike ever, unless a big charge bonus is. But then they're too slow to go on the board. Yeah, I don't really get the whole Death Guard Terminator thing. Like I don't get how you're supposed to win games with Terminators. Like, you know, you never hit first, and you're not really like getting the points quickly, and you're not that durable against a lot of threats. Like mortal wounds, there's so many mortal wounds out there right now, like insane amounts, like Age of Sigmar levels, and they tear up Terminators. Like just, it's horrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of like existing stuff that really just hammers you. And again, like I don't think that plan of just grinding out with Terminators in the middle is going to win you very many games. Bueno. It's obviously not winning you very many games. That's what the numbers say.
Well, I was going to say, we're not pessimists. We actually think Death Guard are a really solid spot overall.
I actually would say Death Guard are quite good.
Yeah.
I just don't being played the way that they need to be played in order to be good.
Yeah, they're still played in the early 9th edition way of like you start like a bunch of Blight Lords and Death Shroud and walk out the board, which the game has gotten so far past that point. Just the game is like left that play type completely behind. Wallace, what units are you looking at in the Codex? Because I think there's a few all-star units that are way underexplored.
So a couple of things. So, and I said this in the last episode, anytime anything ever gets the demon keyword, you immediately have of cross codex options. And when I say cross codex options, I want to first start by saying you have an interesting choice in how you can choose to bring this to the table. So I think the Death Guard Possessed are amazing. They are 24 points per model. They have a solid T5. They have 2 wounds. They still have the -1 damage, and they have a 3-up armor save. They have 4 attacks, and their rend is 2. So they have a decent volume of attacks, not very high rend. It's like reasonable. At least you're getting -1. They're decently survivable for their point cost. I mean, if you compare their point costs and survivability to a Terminator, it's pretty equitable. The same big difference, but I'll get to that in a second. So you have these units of Possessed. You kind of have a choice. So if I want to preserve my faction bonus, my contagion ability, my army Death Guard ability, I can still do that and get demon allies. I just have to summon them to the table, which is not a bad thing. Like you have a lot of dinky characters that are standing around a lot of the time anyways. It does not seem like a bad idea to opt to bring some summoning points with your Death Guard. And on that note, you could also simply bring Death Guard as like a battalion or a Vanguard detachment with a couple units or 3 units of maxed out 10 possessed, and bring an allied detachment with Nurgle demons that are playing the mission.
Yeah. So I will say, I think at purpose of this discussion, just let's probably stick to like Death Guard as a mono faction, just because I think that's the most people want to play them. But yeah, we'll definitely explore Soup in a future episodes for sure.
Sure, but as a Nurgle player, like you have some toolbox, you want to try to utilize what you can get. So as a mono faction, I actually still think it's the best way to do it. Just bring points in summoning.
Yeah. And so here's something I just want to quickly touch on this. I don't want to get a rules debate. That's my least favorite part of the game.
I know you're going to mention.
We have to address it. There's a whole thing with like, can you remain stationary and summon? I don't want to get in this debate. I will just simply say there's arguments for it. There's arguments against it. And check with your TO, because they give you the option to move and still summon because Death Guard counters remain stationary. Then that's definitely like you need summoning points in your list. That's a massive tool you're giving up. With one quick caveat that you can never summon out of a Rhino because you never count as remaining stationary coming out of a transport or disembarking. That's the one. I don't want to get in debate on this because it'll bore people to tears. It bores me to tears, honestly. But it's just a thing you should be aware of. Check with your TO.
I'm going to mention the rules thing really quickly so people who don't know what I'm talking about understand what I'm saying.
Keep it short, though. I don't want to. I'll cover my ears here.
It's inexorable advance on the Death Guard says they're treated as remaining stationary if they make a normal move. Is remaining stationary the same thing as not moving? It's a crisis of 8th edition wording to 9th edition wording. For a while, I assumed that they were different, oddly enough. However, I did find a couple of different arguments in-game that support it, where in the core rules, those words are used interchangeably. So, for instance, with like heavy weapons, if you read the current core rules, it says you get the -1 penalty if you didn't move, not if you remain stationary. It's a weird thing, but potentially, it depends on your TO. If you move, you can summon with Death Guard. But the thing is, even if you can't do that, if you're just leaving like a single character.
I turned that all out, but it doesn't matter at all because it's still super good.
Right. Even if you're just leaving one of your single like cheapo characters, which don't even take up your elite slots. I think you get like 3 for free or something. Like one of your cheapo 50-point characters, like a Tallyman or something. If he's summoning a unit within 12, that's a 12-inch movement from your deployment line or wherever it is that they decided to stand still. That's far more mobile than what you were doing before with just like slow pushing your Terminators up. And it also allows you to in a mobile way deploy your screens. So, for instance, I have these Death Guard possessed. They still really don't like mortal wounds the same way that Death Guard Terminators don't. But I can summon a wall of Plague Bearers in front of them to eat all the Smites or the Tyranid Maleceptors, and also so that I can play for those midfield objectives right off the bat because I was able to summon something in place. You don't need to bring like these spawn units to go push out and get you Stranglehold. You still can if you want to, but you can also summon like cheapo MSU demon troops to snag the middle field for you turn 1. I think it's just a solid basic play. I think I want a lot more summoning in these Nurgle lists.
And part of it too is if you look at things like, for example, like Raising Banners, turn 1, a lot of Death Guard players struggle because there's a lot of missions where like midfield objectives are more than 5 inches from your deployment zone. Well, you can raise a banner up to 12 inches away if you just have a character summoning. Now, obviously, I got them directly on the line in case you go second, but you still get like 10, 9, or 11, depends on the mission and exact setup there. But you get a ton of turn 1 movement. So like turn 1, for example, especially on player place terrain, I think it's super strong. Or maybe like GW style too. I think it's also really solid with that wall. You have like a character up there just summoning onto midfield objectives, summoning screens as you're talking about. And I also think in terms of psychic actions, these Death Guard players like taking things like Warp Ritual or Interrogation because they obviously don't have a great third secondary a lot of the time. And if you lose like your Psyker or you don't want to pass up a Plague Caster's entire phase, you just summon a little Poxburner and he just does an action.
So that's where I want to conversation to. First of all, you can keep your Contagion of Nurgle, your army-wide ability, if you bring summoning points, because you're checked when you muster your army. not when you're in game. So you can.
This has actually been confirmed by GW. That's not like a thing. I think it's one of the first FAQs of the edition.
Yeah, there's no debate. So if you have points in your list, you do not lose your Nurgle faction bonus if the rest of your army is all Death Guard when you brought it to. So again, why this could matter? This is what I want to do with Death Guard, and it's way better than super immobile Terminators. I guarantee you that. I want to bring 3 bricks of Death Guard Possessed, which are a lot faster than Death Guard Terminators, and have similar attack volume. I want to push those up the table with the Stinky Pete with Mr. Fights Last, and a Death Guard Demon Prince, and a what's it called? A Biologist Putrefier.
Yeah, the Mortal Wound Broski.
Yeah, keep those characters in a little cabal towards the middle of your castle, and move up these possessed around them. It turns all of your possessed into murder machines. They have a ton of attacks.
So good.
Rolls. You can give them bonuses on their to wound rolls. You can hype it up so their 6s to wound are causing mortal wounds. You can get full rerolls to wound off of things like Arch.
Which you're obviously going to have Arch Contaminator in the army. You don't leave Death Guard home without it. ever. Yeah.
Right. You can bring Mortarians. Anvil, so now all of these Death Guard possessed units, we've, because of our buffs, turned into kind of scary melee monsters. We can heroically intervene around. I mean, like, you stack enough buffs, boys, they can one round one of the new Imperial Knights.
It's no joke. And part of it, too, is when you have... Because a lot of the stuff, like even the Death Shroud strikes aren't that great in the current meta. You're looking at things like you want to be able to generate mortal wounds to get through a lot of the stacked defenses, like all the invulns or armor contempt running around these days. So often with Death Guard, like the best strength is simply having a high volume of plague weapon attacks. And if you actually do the math, like per point, like possessed actually generate more plague weapon attacks than Death Shrouds even sweeping. So that's really the question of, like, you're gaining more mortal wound output, you're getting more mobility, more and more wound protection too, because you have more wounds per point. And also actually tying it back, remember we said we're going to summon a Poxbringer, for example. You can get some really crazy synergies there. What are you thinking there, Wallace, with that Poxbringer?
So anytime, again, you see a demon's keyword, it's that is, something crazy is going to happen.
So there's some Warphammer spice on the demon's keyword. You know that.
I want to blow my mind with 2 things that I think are amazing that guarantee you have not shown up at a tournament anytime recently, but absolutely should. I don't think Death Guard would be at a 30% win rate if these are practice things people are doing. First, bring a Poxbringer. You can summon it to the table. It can do psychic actions for you. It can also cast debuffs with like Shriveling Pox or Blades of Putrescence.
Virulent Blessing, I think.
Virulent Blessing, that's right. Virulent Blessing on a Death Guard Possessed squad to make it so that they get +1 to wound, and when essentially you roll your 6 on the dice, it makes that attack do an additional or double damage, which the Death Guard Possessed means they have 2 damage attacks on 6s. So really you're rolling 40 attacks with rerolls on your hits, with bonuses to wound, and you're fishing for 6s to cause mortal wounds, and also higher bonus damage. Right. So right off the bat, really cool. A lot of opportunities just looking at that discipline. Like you can get Miasma of Pestilence without having to bring it on one of your casters, that kind of stuff. Second, and this is the thing I really want to drive home, that is my favorite thing, and is currently the reason I dusted this guy off my hobby desk. You can summon Mr. Horticulus Slimix.
The snail himself.
You can summon him 12 inches up the board with your guy with the summoning blue you kind of put towards the line. And then after you summon him, he can summon one of the feculent gnarl maws nearby. Like, he doesn't summon it, it's just a thing he does at the end of the movie. And since you get to order it, you can summon this guy, and then he can make a feculent gnarl maw for you. It's a pretty hefty point investment. I think Horticulus is 160 and the gnarl maw is 95 points. But it allows you to put it exactly where you need it. And the gnarl maw actually has on its profile the way you place it is slightly different than the core rules. So you can usually get it into a better position than if you just brought a Gnarl Maw. And also Gnarl Maws violate normally your all one army thing because they're a unit with
they're a demon unit, not Death Guard. But again, we're doing this during turn 1 or turn 2 or at some point later in the game. We already have our Contagion of Nurgle.
Right. And why this matters, why the Feculent Gnarl Maw is phenomenal, is because what it does is it gives an aura for all of your Death Guard possessed. I mean, all of your demons, right? But it's specifically you want it to be hitting your possessed. And it's going to give them a cover save. So they're getting +1 to their armor there. It's bringing them to a 2-up. It also just gives them a flat +1 to their armor saves if they're within 7 inches. So it's bringing your Death Guard possessed to effectively a 1-up armor save. And then with Armor of Contempt on those bad boys, you have a 0-up armor save on your Death Guard possessed. Hello, Terminator. Like, these Terminators look like chumps if you are able to keep them around that buff. And there's other things it's doing for you. Mike, you know these rules.
The big thing is it has a cute little aura of doing mortal wounds or something, which is, you'll probably forget it during a game. It's bonus points if you ever remember it. But the mortal wound aura does specify it doesn't work on Nurgle, so you don't hurt yourself, you just hurt them. Super minor thing. The main thing, though, the main beautiful chef's kiss part of the Feculent Gnarl Maw, why I always add a little Feculent Gnarl Maw to everything I'm cooking these days, is the advance and charge aura, or the fallback and charge aura. So now let's talk about your Terminators. Your plan as Death Guard is you have Terminators that move 5 inches and then charge. Cool. Your plan playing mobile Death Guard is you have Possessed moving 7 plus D6 inches and then charging. So that's really, like, it's literally like a double movement. Remember how Death Guard Terminators felt good early in the edition when you could soup in warp time and double move them for like an average of 10 inches and then charge? Now you're doing the exact same thing, 7 plus D6, you're going to average of 10. Hello, you basically got warp time back in your list and your monofaction Death Guard list. Just bringing a Feculent Gnarl Maw. It's beautiful. An amazing model too. I'm just going to go, I know we're talking like rules. It's one of the coolest models in the game just to put on the table and just have this little Nurgle garden going.
Yeah. It looks beautiful to run this.
Yeah.
So actually in a couple of practice games, and it's amazing. Like, you have so many ways you can cycle your units. You have all these cool buffs. You have a lot of cross-codec. The summoning points, like I was playing a list with 700 summoning points.
Blessed be that number.
Blessed number. And it actually was really good. I was beating myself playing meta Tyranid lists with this thing. Because you're able to just like create angles of play, which again is a thing that you're missing. You're able to be mobile. You're able to play for the objective. Your castle is incredibly hard to break through. You can summon smite screens for your expensive units. And because of advance and charge, your opponent can't just easily beat you with the tape meta. They have to really, really push themselves back. And if they're midfield to you, there's no way they're shooting you off of it. So it's really, really strong, and I wanted to share it because I think more people need to be playing this, like straight up.
Yeah, and I think that's where the other elements of Death Guard come into play, where the Biologist Putrefier, like one of the things is you're selling much more mobile. Well, he can choose to give his buff at the start of the charge phase. So you just have one guy trail back, then he gives his buff, then you charge off. So it's really easy to get that. In practice, a lot easier than it seems in theory to actually keep that in range. Let's talk about this, how this list would actually look. Because we've got 3 instant possessed, we've got the Putrefier, Biology Professor, we've got the Foul Blight Spawn, we've got a Demon Prince with wings, of course, because I think if you go in the advanced and charge aura, what else do you put in the list besides summoning points?
For me, I think just having a couple of cheap OBSEC units always is nice. You know, I was thinking
Poxwalkers or Plague Marines. Poxwalkers, I think they're great. Yeah,
I was thinking Poxwalkers because you can kind of use them to screen for yourself. I'm not like going crazy. I'm not trying to get like 100 Poxwalkers. Like I've seen some lists recently. I still don't think they're very point efficient anymore at 6 points per mod.
It's unfortunate. So how do I bring like 3 by 10, like 3 by 20? What are you thinking?
You know, I'm thinking like 3 by 10 realistically. Okay. Or if you're doing the 700 point Nurgle build, you're doing like 2 units and you're bringing a Vanguard. I'm not saying that's the best game.
That's fair. Well, I really like Poxwalkers. I think they're some of the best backfield objective holders in the game because they've got the roll to res guys back. So it's like one of those things. It's actually really tough with artillery nerfs these days to actually kill like 10 or 20 poxwalkers off a back objective, and then they just low roll and leave one. He's immune to morale, or she. Poxwalkers come from all backgrounds, but they're immune to morale, and you start bringing back like 5 or so a turn. It's actually really difficult. And the thing is, like, volume of firepower is normally like not super long range. Like, I love having a unit or two of poxwalkers in the backfield. It feels really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, but the way I think of them is just like cheaper plague bearers. And
Yeah.
they fill a similar role if you want them to be anchors in your deployment. I think you definitely want them. I don't think there's a reason to have to tech into like chaos rhinos with plague marines in them or anything like that. Anything crazy like that.
I don't think that's a bad build. Like, it's not as bad as people think it is.
Yeah, I don't think plague marines are bad at all. I think they're actually also 10 plague marines in a chaos rhino is cheaper than the Blight Lord Terminator brick and better. And I will also die on.
Yeah, you have to move. You have to move to win games of 40K. Unfortunately, you can't just trudge at people and hope they like send their most expensive things to charge you for some reason.
Plus, if you're summoning with Nurgle, if that's now like a vector your list has access to, it makes some of these characters more interesting. But yeah, I don't think you need to overinvest into bringing anything. Like you can take some flesh mower, blight.
Those are beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're good. But again, I don't think you need any of this stuff. Like the core of it is those possessed, and you can get most of what else you need out of your summoning box. You know, whether it is just summoning some cheapo units of Beasts and Nurgle, or you want some drones to go contest an objective and you really want to get like up in their face. Like that's actually that I've really enjoyed playing against Eldar in the past, is summoning like a 5-man blight drone or bloat drone, and then like just using it to
plague drones,
jump. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you can jump up and threaten.
Well, I also love, like, again, they're actually not bad into Eldar because they've got this good defensive profile, and also they actually kill them solidly because it's a lot of AP0 attacks with decent volume.
And they're fast enough to like get there. This is part of why I like them.
Yeah. So, and here's where Wallace and I have not fully agreed, because I think the bloat drones are really good because we're both envisioning the same kind of Death Guard list, which is like very much mobile. Summoning is a lot more flexible. It's a lot more movement tricks, which again is what you need to compete against these new busted armies. I think a flesh mower drone or two is really good, just because again it's all about adding more like tricks for them to play around. I think that 6-inch heroic intervention strat is just absolutely brilliant on them. It's like one of those things where they can't really just run and steal objectives off you, which again, but they're also a little pricey at this point. So that you can go either way on those. Do any other demon engines catch your eye?
Yeah, like I mean, again, the flesh mowers, it's like 130. Still something you can send them out on special murder missions if you're hiding them behind obscuring and then jump out to kill a bunch of dudes. You could also potentially bring some like carnivores or some like dreadblades.
Oh, zoom in some cast knights. Okay.
Yep.
I can see that. Yeah.
Not bad having a couple of those guys to kind of like hop out and say "Oonga boonga," scare some stuff that gets too.
Yeah. Well, and then the good news, actually, in that case, you can drop the Tallyman. You can just give one in the Mirror of Fates. Yeah, I think that's a really solid option. I'm also looking at I think Blade Haulers are solid. Again, I wish they were like a little bit better in melee. I don't think they're a bad option. I think one unit of 2 just to kind of keep them a little bit honest with some anti-tank and have the cheap version of the -1 shot strat.
Honestly, if you're going 1 unit of 2 of them, I would personally prefer to take just 2 Plague Burst crawlers for like.
Yeah, I think those are still really solid. I think the indirect got nerfed, but still really reliable, high damage or multi-damage shooting downfield.
Right, but you just drive at them now. Like that, the difference is like now they have armor. They're a little bit tankier, and they were already obscenely tanky.
Yeah.
Now just drive them up the table, have them be kind of by your castle, getting angles of shooting, so your opponent can't just walk out and just free shoot all your Death Guard or whatever.
Keep them honest.
Say, oh yeah. Show me your guys, please. I want to shoot you with my tank.
Yeah, exactly. Like the indirect got nerfed, but again, still like really solid profiles on a very durable. Again, it still benefits from armor contempt. It got even more durable. It's still T8 with 3-up, 5-up with armor contempt, -1 damage. Still a great just gun platform with a really decent points cost.
Yes.
Cool.
And yeah, all of this stuff, like it plays phenomenally well into a lot of these top table armies. Like Tyranid are not a shooting army right now. They can tech into it and it's not bad. Yeah. That's not what they're doing.
Well, they can shoot, like all their stuff is like they have some AP3, but again, your guys are actually really good in the cover, or most importantly, have the mobility to actually pop out from behind walls. So yeah, Tyranid shooting is not scary for you in this list.
No. And it's not like they're going to be wanting to jam Raveners or Warriors or anything like that into your no fights aura.
Yeah.
Especially against Possessed, because those things are just going to dice them up. Like Possessed are just literally going to pick up Warriors. Like they have rerolls.
Yeah, you don't even roll it. You just pick up the Warriors, just throw them on the floor and say, screw you for playing Tyranids.
You get to just smash their models with like impunity. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of power in what Death Guard have the option to. I think Nurgle's cup truthfully flow over. And I'm getting covered in all the delightful feculent Nurgle sauce here, because I truly believe this particular build, if you get adept with it, is strong enough to really just grind it out with some of the top armies in the game.
Yeah, and that's part of that too, is ultimately the day people say like Death Guard, there's just one way to play. I think it's just people have kind of been shoehorning themselves into like the most boring way to play. And I think there's like a whole world of unexplored possibilities. And again, that's why I think Wallace and I, we love chaos. We love being positive, encouraging people to play their faction. We don't want you to stop playing Death Guard at all. Like, we love that a lot of people are passionate. We want people to go out there and play fun lists and high skill lists. And I think if you go out tomorrow and you play some Possessed and try some summoning points in your Death Guard list, I'd love to hear how that went. Let us know in the comments what you're kind of thinking in terms of lists. And Wallace, let's go ahead and go drink some more Nurgle juice. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us on this beautiful Nurgly Warped Wednesday. And we'll catch all of you wonderful people next week. See you, Wallace.
Bye.